Imagine this. There is a single phrase. One line of words that, if you truly believe it, can shift your entire financial destiny. Would you want to know it? For centuries, people searched for alchemy, the secret to turn lead into gold. Kings and explorers sent men across oceans in search of treasures. But what if the real gold mine has always been inside you, waiting to be unlocked with words? Florence Scovel Shinn, a woman ahead of her time, revealed such a phrase. And today I'm here to share it with you. But before I reveal it, let me ask you, have you ever noticed how some people, no matter what happens, always land on their feet financially? They lose a job and within weeks, a better one appears. They take risks and somehow money flows back to them. Meanwhile, others struggle no matter how hard they try. Is it luck? Or is it mindset? Florence taught, words are seeds. What you plant in your mind, you harvest in your life. So what is the phrase? It is this: God is my instant and everlasting supply. Simple, but profoundly powerful. Say it with me in your heart. God is my instant and everlasting supply. Let's unpack this. When you say, God is my supply, you're shifting your trust from fear, from lack, from your bank account, to an infinite source, to something bigger than circumstances. Think of electricity. You don't question if the light will turn on when you flip the switch. You trust the source. That's what this phrase does. It flips the inner switch of wealth consciousness. Florence herself wrote stories of people drowning in debt, repeating this phrase daily, and watching unexpected checks, opportunities, and blessings pour in. I know someone who lived paycheck to paycheck, bills piling up, stress every night. Instead of obsessing over numbers, she started repeating this phrase: God is my instant and everlasting supply. She said it while cooking, while commuting, while folding laundry. Within months, her employer offered a surprise promotion. She was invited into a side business that tripled her income. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you align your words with abundance, coincidences multiply. Let me ask you this. Did Thomas Edison give up after his first failure? No. Did the Wright brothers doubt the invisible law of flight? No. They trusted the unseen. Why should we doubt the unseen law of supply? Most people live in the prison of fear. Fear of bills. Fear of losing jobs. Fear of not having enough. But fear is nothing more than faith in lack. This one phrase demolishes that prison. It places you in a vibration of trust. And when you trust, doors open. People appear. Opportunities arrive. So tonight I leave you with a challenge. Don't just listen. Don't just nod. Use it. Repeat it. Believe it. The next time doubt whispers in your ear, declare boldly, God is my instant and everlasting supply. Because wealth doesn't begin in your wallet. It begins in your words. And the right words, spoken with faith, can move mountains. Thank you. Key takeaways. Words are seeds. What you speak shapes your financial reality. Florence Scovel Shinn taught a powerful phrase: God is my instant and everlasting supply. Trusting an infinite source creates confidence, dissolves fear, and attracts opportunities. Repetition of positive affirmations rewires the mind for abundance. Wealth begins with mindset, not external circumstances. Aligning words with faith in supply invites miracles and unexpected blessings. Let's go deeper into this truth. Words are seeds. Every word that leaves your mouth, every thought that circles in your mind, carries the energy of a seed. And just like in nature, the seed doesn't remain a seed forever. It carries within it the potential to grow, to multiply, to become something greater than what it looks like on the surface. Imagine holding a tiny apple seed between your fingers. So small, so fragile, almost invisible in its power. But planted in the soil, nurtured with sunlight and water, that seed can grow into a tree that produces thousands of apples across its lifetime. Not just apples for one person, but apples for generations, each containing more seeds, each carrying the potential of entire orchards. That is exactly how your words work. You might think, it's just a phrase, just a thought, just a sentence I muttered. But in truth, it's a seed dropped into the fertile ground of your subconscious mind, and from there, it grows and multiplies, shaping your reality in ways you can't always see at first. Florence Scovel Shinn believed this so deeply because she saw it in action again and again. She told stories of people who were drowning in debt, worried, fearful, hopeless, and yet by changing their words they changed their lives. One man she mentioned had been out of work for months, desperate, feeling worthless. His vocabulary was filled with words like, "I can't, I'm stuck, nothing works out for me." And isn't it true? When we say those words, we're watering seeds of lack. We're telling the soil of our mind to produce more of the same. And the soil never argues. It never says, "Wait a minute, do you really want this?" Well, simply grows what you plant. The man learned to change his language, to speak words of supply instead of lack, and within a short time, he was offered a position that not only paid him well but filled him with joy. His outer circumstances shifted, not because the world suddenly changed, but because he changed the seeds he planted. Think about it in your own life. How many times have you caught yourself saying, "I'm broke, I never have enough," or "money slips right through my fingers"? Each of those phrases is a seed. Spoken once, it may seem harmless. Spoken daily, it becomes a forest of scarcity. And then we look at our lives and wonder why the ground around us is filled with weeds. The truth is, we planted them ourselves. But here's the beautiful part. You can also plant words that carry life, abundance, and prosperity. You can sow seeds of faith, of expectation, of wealth, and those seeds, too, will grow. There's a story I once heard of a woman who was constantly in financial struggle. Every time someone asked her how she was, her answer was the same. Just surviving. Those two words became her identity. Just surviving. Not thriving, not expanding, not flourishing, just surviving. And year after year, that was exactly what she lived. Surviving. Then, after learning about Florence's teachings, she decided to try something new. She began answering differently. Instead of just surviving, she started saying, "I'm blessed. I'm provided for. Everything I need comes to me." First it felt strange, even fake. But little by little, people noticed a change in her energy. Opportunities that had been invisible before began to appear. Someone recommended her for a better job. A friend offered to partner with her in a small business. Within a year, her life was unrecognizable. Why? Because the words she planted grew into a different harvest. This isn't about wishful thinking or pretending problems don't exist. It's about recognizing the law of cause and effect at the level of language. Farmers don't plant thorns and expect roses. They don't scatter weeds and then cry out in shock when weeds appear. They understand the law of the soil. Yet how often do we, in our daily speech, plant words of fear and then wonder why fear shows up? How often do we water lack with conversations about how bad things are? How little there is, how impossible it seems. We forget that the soil of the subconscious is always listening, always receiving, always producing. Children show us this more clearly than anyone. Have you ever noticed how children believe words without resistance? Tell a child, "You're smart, you're capable, you're loved," and they grow into that identity. Tell them, "You're lazy, you'll never succeed," and those seeds too will sprout. Adults like to believe they're immune, but in truth, our subconscious is still that same fertile ground, still receiving every word we repeat to ourselves. That's why affirmations are powerful. That's why Florence Scovel Shinn placed so much importance on repeating phrases that align with abundance. Each repetition is another seed, another watering, another strengthening of roots beneath the surface. Think of your words as invisible architects. Every sentence you speak is like a brick being laid down. Slowly, day after day, you're building a structure around you. That structure can be a palace of wealth, beauty, and opportunity, or it can be a prison of fear and lack. The choice is in the words you choose. Some people might argue, "But I'm only saying what's true. I really don't have money right now." And yes, facts are facts. But words are not about describing your present situation. They're about creating your future. When a farmer plants an apple seed, he doesn't say, "This isn't an apple tree." It's just a seed. There's no fruit here. He knows the seed is not the end but the beginning. The same is true with your words. They don't reflect only what is. They call into being what will be. Florence once wrote, "Your word is your wand." Picture that. A wand in your hand with the ability to direct energy, to summon, to create. If you wave the wand and say, "I lack," lack appears. If you wave the wand and say, "I prosper," prosperity moves toward you. The power is not in wishing, it's in speaking with belief. Think about the great leaders of history. Did Martin Luther King Jr. say, "Things are terrible and they'll never change"? No. He said, "I have a dream." Those 4 words planted seeds of hope in millions of hearts, seeds that grew into movements and freedoms. Words built nations, toppled empires, started revolutions, and healed broken spirits. How can we doubt that words can also shape our personal finances, our daily reality, our future? Let me ask you, what words have you been planting in your own life lately? If you looked at your harvest right now, your relationships, your finances, your peace of mind, could you trace it back to seeds you planted months or years ago? And if you don't like the harvest, the solution isn't despair. The solution is to start planting new seeds today. Because the soil is always ready. The ground of your subconscious never closes its doors. It never says, "Sorry, it's too late." The moment you change the seeds, you begin to change the harvest. And maybe that's the greatest gift Florence Scovel Shinn left us. The reminder that we're never powerless. No matter how bad things look, no matter how empty the bank account feels, you have a seed in your hand right now. You have words in your mouth that can shift the soil of your destiny. The question is, what will you plant? When you say the words, "God is my instant and everlasting supply," something subtle but powerful begins to shift within you. It may sound simple, almost too simple to carry weight, but simplicity is often where the greatest truths live. The moment those words leave your lips with belief, you are moving your trust away from the fragile ground of fear, away from the shaky numbers in your bank account, away from the panic of deadlines and bills, and you are placing it into a foundation that cannot collapse. Think of how most people live. Their sense of security is tied to a paycheck, a savings account, an investment portfolio, or even the promise of someone else's support. But all of these are external, temporary, and unstable. Paycheck can disappear overnight. Markets rise and fall. Promises can be broken. The fear of loss is always there. Yet when you declare, "God is my instant and everlasting supply," you are shifting the center of your financial life from something that can be taken away to something that cannot. You are anchoring yourself to an infinite, inexhaustible source that exists beyond human circumstances. It is like standing near a faucet versus standing near a river. If your sense of wealth is tied only to the faucet, what happens when the faucet runs dry? You panic, you suffer, you wonder how you'll survive. But when your supply comes from the river itself, endless, flowing, never ceasing, you stop worrying if one stream of water shuts off. You know the source remains, and the flow will find another channel to reach you. Florence Scovel Shinn wanted people to understand that God, Spirit, infinite intelligence, whatever name you give it, is that river. And when you remind yourself, "God is my instant and everlasting supply," you're declaring that no matter what dries up, no matter what closes, the source itself cannot run out. I once met a man who had built a successful business. He was proud, confident, and believed his wealth was the fruit of his own effort. But when the economy shifted, he lost almost everything. His savings dwindled, his clients left, and he fell into despair. His entire sense of worth and safety had been tied to numbers in an account. He felt empty, powerless. But then, someone introduced him to this phrase. First, he resisted it. "What good are words?" he thought. "I need money, not sentences." Yet he was desperate enough to try. Every morning and every night, he repeated, "God is my instant and everlasting supply." At first, nothing changed in the outer world, but something shifted inside. His panic softened. His hopelessness lifted. A quiet confidence began to replace his fear. Within weeks, he received a phone call from an old friend with a new opportunity. Then a client he thought was gone returned unexpectedly. Slowly, the flow resumed, and this time, he didn't cling to the channels as his supply. He saw them only as instruments. The real source was deeper, invisible, constant. That's what happens when you use this phrase with faith. You stop seeing money as the source and start seeing it as the channel. You no longer obsess over where it will come from, because you know the source is unlimited, and channels will open as needed. Imagine the difference in your heart when bills arrive. One person looks at the bill and thinks, "How will I ever pay this? I don't have enough." Fear tightens the chest and stress builds. Another person, holding the same bill, whispers, "God is my instant and everlasting supply. This too will be provided for." Immediately, instead of fear, there is peace. Instead of shrinking, the mind opens. Ideas flow. Solutions appear. Which person do you think will find opportunities faster? Which one will magnetize solutions? There's a woman I know who lived through this shift. She was a single mother with 3 children, constantly struggling to make ends meet. The refrigerator was often half empty, and bills stacked on the kitchen counter like a wall of shame. She used to repeat to herself daily, "I'm so tired of being broke." And every month that phrase played out in her life. Then one day, she came across Florence's teaching and decided to experiment. She wrote the phrase, "God is my instant and everlasting supply," on sticky notes and placed them on her bathroom mirror, on the refrigerator door, on the dashboard of her car. She repeated it while cooking, while waiting in line, while folding clothes. Her children even began to mimic her words, chanting them playfully around the house. First, nothing seemed different, but within a month, she was offered extra hours at work. Then, a neighbor offered to pay her generously to babysit. Soon after, she received a government refund she hadn't expected. One stream after another opened, until she realized she was no longer behind. For the first time in years, she felt not just relief but freedom. The bills stopped controlling her emotions. She saw them as temporary, while her supply was everlasting. Think about the power of those 2 words, instant and everlasting. Instant means supply is available now, not someday, not when conditions improve, not when the stars align, but now. Everlasting means it never ends, it never dries up, it never runs out. Imagine walking into a room filled with light. You don't panic about whether there will be enough light for you, whether it will run out before you've finished. You trust the light fills the room and will continue to fill it as long as the source is present. That is what this phrase affirms. A light of supply that cannot be extinguished. Skeptics might say, this is just positive thinking. But it is more than that. It is alignment. Positive thinking says, I hope things work out. This phrase declares, I know the source already provides. Positive thinking leans on willpower. This phrase leans on faith in an infinite law. Florence often said that when people trust the infinite supply, miracles become the normal. And haven't you noticed that when you are calm, when you feel provided for, when you stop chasing and start trusting, opportunities seem to come knocking? Phone call out of nowhere. Chance encounter. An idea that sparks a new path. Coincidences multiply. But are they coincidences? Or are they channels through which the supply flows once you open the door with faith? Let me ask you something. Do you think the universe is stingy? Do you believe that the same intelligence that grows forests, paints sunsets, fills oceans with billions of fish, and scatters stars across endless galaxies suddenly becomes scarce when it comes to your life? History shows us otherwise. Great innovators, explorers, dreamers, people like Edison, Tesla, Da Vinci, they trusted in the invisible. They drew from a supply that could not be measured or contained. And that's why their contributions outlived them. If such infinite creativity exists, can it not also provide you with the financial flow you need? So picture this. Every time you say, God is my instant and everlasting supply, you are tuning your mind like a radio. When the radio is set to the wrong frequency, you hear static, confusion, noise. But when you turn the dial just right, the music is clear. The music was always there, but you couldn't hear it until you aligned. The supply was always there, but you couldn't receive it until you tuned in. And this phrase is the tuning dial. Say it in the morning when you rise. Say it before you sleep. Say it when fear whispers in your ear. Say it when bills come, when opportunities appear, when doubt creeps in. Each time you're choosing trust over fear, faith over panic, abundance over lack. You're declaring that no matter what dries up in the outer world, the river never stops flowing. And the more you believe it, the more the flow will find you. When you begin to see money not as the source itself but as only one of the many channels through which supply flows, something remarkable happens inside you. Most people are trapped in the belief that their salary, their job, their business, or a specific person is their only lifeline. They cling tightly to that one channel, and the moment it wobbles, they collapse in fear. But Florence Scovel Shinn wanted people to understand a higher truth. Money is never the source. It is only a vessel, a stream, a doorway. The true supply comes from something far greater, and when one channel closes, another opens, just as rivers branch off into endless streams across the land. Imagine a person standing on the shore of a vast ocean, yet staring only at a single bucket of water they hold in their hands. They are terrified the bucket might spill, that it might dry up, that someone might take it away. All the while, they are standing before an endless ocean that can never run out. That is how most people treat money. They fix their eyes on the limited bucket, whether it's a paycheck, a savings account, or a single opportunity, while forgetting that the ocean of supply is infinite, ever-present, and always accessible. When you begin to trust the ocean instead of clinging to the bucket, your fear fades. You stop worshipping the channel and start honoring the source. I once knew a woman who worked for a company for nearly 20 years. It was her lifeline, her identity, her safety. Every morning she woke up with the thought, as long as I have this job, I'll be okay. But then one day, the company downsized, and she was let go. The devastation was enormous, not just because of the loss of income, but because her sense of safety was tied to one fragile channel. For weeks, she spiraled into despair. Yet, in that darkness, a friend gave her one of Florence's books. She came across the phrase, "God is your supply, not man, not circumstances." Something about those words lit a spark in her. She began to repeat daily, "God is my instant and everlasting supply." Slowly the fear eased. Soon after, a former colleague reached out with a freelance opportunity. Then, a completely unexpected connection introduced her to a new career path she had never considered, one that gave her more freedom and more money than she had ever earned before. Looking back, she realized that losing her job had only cut off a single stream, not the source. The river of supply had simply chosen new channels to flow through. Think of the farmer who plants seeds. He doesn't worry about which cloud will bring the rain. He trusts that nature has endless ways to water his field. Clouds, rivers, streams, even underground springs. So it is with wealth. If one opportunity dries up, supply finds another way. The universe is never out of ideas. Florence said, "When one door closes, another door is opened." But too often we stand frozen in front of the closed door, crying, pounding, begging it to open again, while the new door stands wide open behind us. When you remember that money is a channel, not the source, you stop staring at closed doors and start trusting the flow to find you through new ones. There's a story of a man who lost his entire fortune in a failed business venture. He had invested everything, believing that success was tied to this one project. When it collapsed, so did he. For months he wandered in shame, believing his life was over. Then one day, while reading, he came across the line, "Rivers of supply are never cut off. Only the channels change." Those words shook him. He realized he had confused the channel with the source. Slowly, he rebuilt, not by chasing the same failed venture, but by opening himself to new ideas. He began consulting, sharing the lessons he had learned from failure. That consulting grew into a thriving business, and soon he was wealthier than before. He often said, "I lost everything when I thought money was the source. I gained everything when I saw it was only the channel." Think of your own life. Maybe you've worried about losing a job, a client, or a business deal. Maybe you've stared at your bank account late at night, feeling the numbers slip lower, as if they had the power to define your worth. But what if you could remind yourself in that moment, this is only one stream. The river never ends. Can you imagine the relief, the freedom, the openness that would flood your mind? Suddenly, instead of fear, there is curiosity. Instead of clinging, there is release. Instead of panic, there is trust that new streams will appear. Florence once told the story of a woman who depended on a wealthy relative for financial help. She believed her survival was tied to this one person. But when the relative stopped supporting her, she was devastated. Out of desperation, she turned to affirmations. Every day, she declared, "God is my supply, and channels open to me in expected and unexpected ways." Within weeks, she was offered a teaching position she never thought she was qualified for. That job not only supported her but gave her independence and dignity. She realized that relying on a person had kept her small. Trusting the true source opened doors she never dreamed of. History, too, reminds us of this lesson. Think about inventors and pioneers. Did the Wright brothers trust one single machine to prove the law of flight? No. They built, failed, rebuilt, and tried again, because they trusted the law of flight itself, not the fragile channels of wood and cloth. Did Thomas Edison stop inventing after his first light bulb design failed? No. He trusted the principle of electricity, not one faulty design. Likewise, when you anchor your trust in the infinite supply instead of one fragile channel, you gain resilience, creativity, and an unshakable sense of peace. It is easy to fall into the trap of worshipping the paycheck, the business, the client, or even a single lucky break. But those are only vessels. They may carry the flow of supply for a time, but they are not the river itself. And when one vessel cracks or spills, the river is still flowing, waiting to pour through new vessels. This is why Florence taught her students to constantly remind themselves, "I do not depend on persons or conditions. God is my supply." She wanted people to stop shrinking their faith into small buckets and instead open their hearts to the endless ocean. So the next time something falls apart, a job ends, a client leaves, an investment fails, resist the urge to believe your supply has vanished. Instead, pause and remind yourself, that was just one channel. The river is still flowing. The source has endless ways to reach me. Feel the peace in those words. Feel the burden lift from your shoulders. Feel the curiosity rise as you wonder, I wonder what new channel will open for me now. Because the truth is, when you stop clinging to the bucket, your hands are free to receive the ocean. And that is when wealth, opportunity, and abundance begin to move toward you in ways you never expected. Repetition of positive affirmations may sound like a simple practice, but its power is extraordinary because every repetition is a drop of water carving its way into stone. The subconscious mind, like rich soil, doesn't argue, doesn't resist, doesn't question whether a seed is good or bad. It simply takes what is planted and nurtures it until it grows into something tangible in your life. When you choose to repeat affirmations that align with abundance, prosperity, and trust in supply, you are, little by little, rewiring the hidden patterns that have controlled your life for years. Think of it like training a wild horse. At first, it kicks and resists, untamed and unwilling to obey. But with steady repetition, gentle direction, and patience, the horse begins to trust, to yield, to carry you with grace. In the same way, the mind that has been filled for decades with words of lack, fear, and doubt will not instantly accept new truths. But when you repeat those affirmations over and over, the resistance weakens, the fear softens, and the new truth begins to take root. Imagine someone who has spent their entire life saying, "I can't afford it." Every time they see something they desire, their automatic thought is, "That's too expensive, I'll never have enough." Over the years, that phrase becomes like a groove in the brain, a deep path that thought naturally follows. And so, life mirrors it back. They find themselves in situations where money slips away, opportunities pass them by, and even when a chance arises, they hesitate out of habit, saying, "I can't afford it." But now picture that same person deciding one day to change the script. Instead of repeating lack, they begin to affirm, "I am always provided for. God is my instant and everlasting supply." First, it feels foreign, almost like a lie. The mind pushes back. But look at your bills, look at your empty wallet. Yet, with each repetition, something small begins to shift. The old groove weakens. A new path forms. And soon, without even realizing it, they begin to make choices from a place of trust instead of fear. They notice opportunities that once seemed invisible. They take actions they never would have dared before. The outer world starts to mirror the new inner language. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this principle well. She told the story of a woman who had lived in constant scarcity. She owed money, she was anxious, and her words always revolved around what she lacked. Florence instructed her to begin saying daily, "I have a perfect, endless supply for every demand." At first, the woman scoffed. She thought, "How can words change anything?" But Florence encouraged her. "Keep saying it. The words you repeat shape the picture your subconscious accepts. And what your subconscious accepts, life reflects." The woman obeyed, though reluctantly. Weeks passed, and gradually her panic lessened. Then unexpected money began to arrive. A forgotten debt was repaid. A job offer came through. Doors opened one by one until her financial life transformed. Looking back, she realized it wasn't the outer events that changed first. It was the inner repetition of truth that prepared the way. Science today even confirms what Florence taught nearly a century ago. Neuroscientists talk about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. Every repeated thought strengthens certain neural pathways, while neglected thoughts allow others to fade. In simple terms, repetition reshapes the brain. If for years you've repeated phrases of lack, your brain is wired for lack. But if you consistently repeat affirmations of abundance, you are literally reshaping your brain to see, expect, and attract abundance. Florence didn't use the word neuroplasticity, but she knew the principle. What you habitually speak, you bring to pass. Let's bring it down to something personal and relatable. Think about learning to drive. The first time you sat behind the wheel, everything felt awkward. The pedals, the mirrors, the signals, it was overwhelming. But through repetition, through doing it again and again, it became second nature. Today, you likely drive without thinking consciously about every movement. Affirmations work the same way. First, they feel forced. But with repetition, they sink deep into your subconscious until they become automatic beliefs. And once they become beliefs, your actions, choices, and opportunities align with them effortlessly. I once heard about a young man who grew up in poverty. He had absorbed all the language of lack from his parents. Money doesn't grow on trees. People like us never get ahead. We can't afford that. By the time he reached adulthood, he carried those words like heavy chains. His career stalled, his finances were unstable, and he lived with constant fear of not having enough. Then he stumbled upon Florence's writings. Skeptical but desperate, he began repeating daily, "God is my instant and everlasting supply. I am always provided for." At first, he whispered it under his breath, embarrassed. But soon he said it while walking, while showering, while working. The words became a rhythm in his life. Slowly, opportunities came his way. A mentor appeared, a business idea formed, doors opened that had always seemed closed. Years later, he credited that single practice of repetition for turning his entire life around. It is not magic in the sense of waving a wand. It is the magic of persistence. Every word you repeat is like a drop of water falling onto stone. One drop does nothing. 10 drops do little. But thousands of drops over time carve a path that no one thought possible. That is why Florence urged her students never to give up on affirmations, even when results seemed slow. She said, "Your word is a wand. The more you wave it, the more it directs the energy of your life." Consider the alternative. Most people already repeat affirmations daily, though unconsciously. They say, "I'm tired, I'm broke, I'm unlucky, I never win, nothing works out for me." And then they live out those affirmations as reality. The universe doesn't judge. The subconscious doesn't filter. It simply says, "So be it." If repetition of negative words creates lack, Why would repetition of positive words not create abundance? It's the same law, only reversed in direction. Think of it this way: your subconscious mind is like a garden. If you plant weeds every day, you shouldn't be surprised when weeds take over. But if you plant flowers daily, in time the garden transforms. Repetition is the act of planting. It is not glamorous. It is not instant. But it is inevitable. What you water grows. And when you repeat affirmations like, "God is my instant and everlasting supply," you are watering seeds of abundance that cannot help but blossom in their season. So picture yourself waking each morning and choosing your words intentionally. Instead of letting fear dictate your first thoughts, you take control. You whisper, "I am always provided for. I am open to unexpected blessings. God is my instant and everlasting supply." You carry those words into your day. They accompany you like a steady drumbeat beneath the noise of the world. Every repetition deepens the groove of abundance in your mind. Every repetition weakens the hold of fear. Until one day you realize you no longer have to remind yourself, you simply know. And that knowing radiates out, shaping circumstances, attracting opportunities, and aligning life itself with the truth you planted long ago. Wealth does not begin in your wallet. It begins in your mind. This is one of the most liberating truths you can ever embrace, yet it is also the one most people resist. Society has conditioned us to look outward for wealth. We stare at our paychecks, our bank balances, our possessions, and we believe those numbers define our prosperity. But all of those things are only the fruit of an invisible root system. And that root system is your mindset. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this deeply. She taught that circumstances are not the cause, they are the effect. The real cause is the state of your inner life, your beliefs, your thoughts, your words. Change those, and the outer world eventually rearranges itself to match. Imagine a gardener walking through her yard, frustrated that no roses are blooming. She complains about the empty soil, shakes her head at the lack of color, and tells herself that roses just aren't meant for her. But when you look closely, you see she never planted rose seeds. She scattered weeds, watered them faithfully, and then wondered why roses did not appear. This is how most of us approach wealth. We repeat words of fear. "I'll never have enough, life is hard, money slips through my fingers." We nurture those beliefs with constant worry. And then we stand in confusion, wondering why abundance doesn't bloom in our lives. Wealth is never about the garden you see above the surface. It is always about the seeds planted in the unseen soil beneath. There's a story about a man who spent his life chasing money. He worked long hours, switched jobs constantly, and even dabbled in risky schemes, hoping to strike it rich. But no matter how much he earned, it always slipped away. Bills piled up, debts haunted him, and he grew bitter. One day, in desperation, he attended a lecture on prosperity where he heard these words: "Your outer world is the shadow of your inner world. Until you change within, nothing lasting can change without." Those words struck him like lightning. He realized he had been working tirelessly on the branches while ignoring the roots. His mindset had been one of fear and scarcity. He believed money would always abandon him, and so it did. From that day, he began practicing affirmations daily. He started saying, "I am open to abundance. I am worthy of prosperity. God is my instant and everlasting supply." At first, nothing seemed to change, but slowly he noticed he made different choices. He stopped chasing quick fixes. He began saving wisely. He took opportunities more confidently. Over time, his finances stabilized, then grew. It wasn't luck. It was alignment. His outer wealth finally reflected his inner wealth. You've probably seen people who seem to have everything financially yet are still poor in spirit. They live in mansions, drive luxury cars, but are filled with fear, anger, or emptiness. And you've also seen people with modest means who radiate peace, joy, and a sense of sufficiency. Which one would you call truly wealthy? Wealth is more than money. It is a state of being. It is knowing you are provided for, trusting in abundance, and carrying that confidence into every area of life. And ironically, when you live with that mindset, money often flows more easily because you are no longer repelling it with fear. Think of the Wright brothers. They dreamed of flight long before anyone believed it was possible. Their outer resources were limited. They did not have government funding, advanced laboratories, or great wealth. What they had was a mindset that refused to believe in limits. They saw possibility where others saw impossibility. And because they held that vision firmly in their minds, they became the first to fly. Wealth in your life works the same way. If you see only limits, you will live within those limits. If you hold the image of abundance, you will begin to experience it, even if at first your circumstances seem unchanged. The mind is the workshop, and life is only the canvas. There is a woman I once knew who lived with a constant dread of bills. Every time she checked the mail, her heart raced. She would say aloud, "I hate money. It only causes stress." That became her mantra. And sure enough, her life mirrored it. Unexpected expenses always arose. Her car broke down. Her medical bills soared. It was as if money was a curse that followed her everywhere. Then, after hearing Florence's teachings, she decided to experiment. She shifted her words. Whenever a bill arrived, instead of saying, "I hate money," she began to say, "I bless this bill, for it reminds me that I am provided for. I bless the flow of money that pays it." First, it felt unnatural, even silly. But she persisted. Over time, something remarkable happened. The dread disappeared. She began noticing that her income stretched further. Unexpected refunds came in. New opportunities opened. Her entire relationship with money transformed. And it wasn't because the numbers changed first. It was because her mindset changed first. This is why Florence said, "Fear is only inverted faith. When your faith is in lack, you produce lack. When your faith is in supply, you produce supply." Wealth consciousness is about shifting that faith. It is about deciding to believe in abundance even when your eyes show you scarcity. And that decision starts with the mind. Have you ever met someone who seems to attract opportunities effortlessly? Jobs, ideas, connections, they flow to them without struggle. It is not always because they are smarter or luckier. It is often because their mindset is tuned to abundance. They expect good things. They believe in possibilities. They trust that life is on their side. And so, their energy attracts the very opportunities they are open to. Meanwhile, someone else may have more skills or even more resources but repels opportunities because they live with a mindset of doubt. They close the door before it can even knock. Florence told her students that the subconscious mind was like a silent partner in life. If you fill it with images of wealth, trust, and supply, it works tirelessly to align your circumstances with that belief. If you fill it with fear, it works just as faithfully to create obstacles and scarcity. This is why she placed such emphasis on affirmations and visualization. They are not empty rituals. They are tools for reshaping the invisible root system from which your life grows. So let me ask you, what is your relationship with wealth right now? Do you see it as something outside of you, controlled by others, slipping through your fingers? Or do you see it as something within you, a state of mind that cannot be taken away? If wealth begins in the mind, then no circumstance can strip it from you. You may lose a job, but you do not lose the wealth consciousness that created it. And that consciousness will create again. You may face setbacks, but you do not lose the root. And the root will produce new fruit. The greatest fortune you can ever possess is the mindset of abundance. With that, you can rebuild no matter what happens. Without it, no amount of money will ever feel like enough. Wealth consciousness is not about ignoring reality. It is about choosing the reality you want to align with. You may see an empty bank account, but within your mind, you hold the power to declare, "This is temporary. My supply is infinite. I am provided for." And that declaration, believed and repeated, begins to shift everything. True wealth is not measured by what sits in your wallet. It is measured by the unshakable confidence that you live in a universe of endless supply, that you are connected to it, and that no circumstance can cut you off. The bank account will rise and fall, but your wealth consciousness remains steady, and as long as it remains steady, the outer world will eventually reflect it. Wealth, therefore, begins not with money, but with a mindset rooted in abundance, spoken through affirmations, and lived with faith. There comes a moment in every person's life when the real test of faith arrives. It rarely comes at a time of comfort or ease. It comes when the bank account is empty, when the bills are stacked, when the opportunities seem to vanish into thin air. It comes in those dark nights when you stare at the ceiling wondering how you will make it through the next day. This is the crucible where wealth is either lost forever or forged stronger than ever. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that it is in these very moments, when everything outside looks hopeless, that you must hold your faith the tightest. For faith is not faith when everything looks easy. Faith is faith when nothing makes sense, yet you still believe. Picture a sailor out on the open sea. The skies are clear, the waters calm, the wind steady. Steering the ship feels effortless. Anyone could be a sailor on a day like that. But then, without warning, dark clouds gather, the waves roar, and the wind howls in defiance. The boat rocks violently. The sailor can barely see the horizon. In that storm, you discover the difference between a casual sailor and a true captain. In life, the same principle holds. Anyone can say they believe in abundance when checks are rolling in and opportunities are knocking on every door. But when the storm arrives, when scarcity seems to strangle your hope, your words, your mindset, your faith are tested. And those who stand firm in those storms are the ones who eventually attract the greatest wealth. I remember a story of a woman named Clara. She had lost her job, and her savings had dwindled to almost nothing. Each day felt heavier than the last. She would sit in her kitchen, staring at a stack of bills, feeling like the walls were closing in. But Clara remembered a teaching from Florence. Never look at lack. Always look at supply. One night, instead of crying herself to sleep, she decided to take a bold step. She lit a candle, placed her bills in front of her, and began affirming out loud, "I walk in abundance. God is my instant and everlasting supply. I am rich in every way." First it felt like a lie. Her hands trembled as she spoke the words. But she kept repeating them night after night. Something began to shift inside her. The panic softened. The dread loosened its grip. Within a few weeks, Clara received a call from a company she had applied to months earlier. Not only did they hire her, but the salary was higher than she had ever earned. Some would call it coincidence. Clara knew it was the fruit of her faith. She had held her belief in abundance when everything screamed lack, and life eventually bowed to that conviction. Faith is like planting a seed in the dark soil. You cannot see what is happening underground, yet something is moving, growing, preparing to break through. If you dig it up every day to check, you destroy its growth. This is what most people do with their desires. They affirm abundance once or twice, then immediately look around and say, "But nothing is happening." They dig up the seed of faith with doubt. They water it with worry. And then they wonder why nothing grows. Florence urged her students to speak their affirmations and then release them, trusting that the universe was already at work. She compared faith to a boomerang. You send it out with certainty, and it returns multiplied. There's a powerful example from history. Do you remember when Thomas Edison was working on inventing the electric light bulb? He failed not once, not 10 times, but over 1,000 times. People mocked him, called him foolish, told him to give up. Can you imagine the scarcity of hope he must have felt after the 500th failure? Yet Edison once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That is the language of faith. He refused to look at lack. He looked at supply. He believed that light existed even when darkness surrounded him. And eventually his faith bore fruit, and the world was changed forever. What would have happened if he had given up after failure number 900? Faith is not measured in comfort but in persistence. Think about your own life. How many times have you stopped just short of your breakthrough because you let doubt creep in? How many times have you dug up your seed with words like, "It's not working," or "Maybe it's not meant for me"? Florence would tell you that those very words are what block your blessing. She believed that when you declare abundance in the face of lack, you are standing in alignment with divine law. And divine law never fails. It only requires that you stay aligned long enough for it to manifest. I once met a man who told me his story of near bankruptcy. His business had collapsed, debts were crushing him, and friends turned away. He admitted he was moments from giving up entirely. But then he remembered something his grandmother had taught him as a child: God's supply never runs dry. He began repeating that phrase every day, sometimes through tears, sometimes through clenched teeth. He would drive to meet creditors with that phrase on his lips. Slowly things shifted. A new investor appeared, opportunities resurfaced, and his business found new life. Today he is thriving. And when asked what turned it around, he doesn't credit strategy or luck. He credits faith. "I refused to let go," he said. "Even when I had nothing, I spoke as if I had everything." The truth is, life will test you. There will be days when fear whispers louder than faith. There will be moments when everything seems delayed. But those moments are not signs of failure. They are the training ground of prosperity. Every great person in history, every innovator, every visionary, every spiritual teacher had to walk through deserts of doubt before reaching their promised land. Moses led the Israelites through the wilderness for 40 years, yet he kept declaring God's promise of abundance in the land ahead. Imagine if he had turned back at the first sign of difficulty. Humanity itself is a testament to those who kept faith alive when everything seemed impossible. The most dangerous enemy to wealth is not lack of money. It is the loss of faith. Because once faith is gone, the mind collapses into despair, and despair closes the door to every blessing. Florence Scovel Shinn reminded us that your word is your wand. When you speak words of faith, you are holding the wand that opens doors, shifts circumstances, and draws wealth toward you. Even when nothing appears to change outwardly, something is rearranging itself inwardly, and in time the outer world will match it. So when the storms rage in your life, when the bills are high, when the opportunities seem scarce, remember this truth. The one thing you cannot afford to lose is your faith. Hold on to it as if your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. Wealth is not built only on strategy or effort. It is built on the invisible foundation of unwavering faith. And as long as that foundation is unshakable, the structure of abundance will rise, even from the ruins of loss, even from the ashes of failure, even from the darkest night of despair. Faith is the bridge between lack and supply, and only those who keep walking across it, no matter how long or uncertain the journey, arrive at the land of wealth. And so, the real secret isn't out there. It's already within you. Wealth, faith, and abundance are not distant dreams. They're choices you make daily with your words, your mindset, and your belief. If this message stirred something inside you, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs hope today. And subscribe, not because I asked, but because every time you do, you're choosing to surround yourself with power, wisdom, and unstoppable growth. Now let me ask you, what's the one belief about money you're finally ready to let go of forever? Drop your answer below.